All right, guys, I'm in the Line Speed Jedi Bat Cave, e.g., my daughter's old bedroom, and I wanted to talk to you about the mindset of a steelheader. And this is brought on by watching some fly fishing videos about the mindset of fly fishermen trying to catch big trout. And I thought it would be good to do this about the mindset of a steelheader because there's a guy named Pacific Northwest. That's his YouTube channel. Made a really good video about fishing on the Deschutes in November. Him and Jen wanted to get away, do some fishing, work on his cast, maybe swing up a steelhead. They had pressures from everyday life, thought it would be good to decompress out on the Deschutes. And the upshot of the story is his casting sucked. Bless his heart. I've been there, brother. I know. Um, go there from time to time still. And he was so disappointed, and I felt so bad for him because I felt the discouragement of trying to be a fisherman, trying to be a swinger, trying to be a two-handed guy, and everything can go wrong in fly fishing and in spey casting, and especially steelhead fishing, because they just don't want to cooperate. So anyway, he had a good attitude. He was reflective. He pondered that he had been out in nature and he appreciated it and all that kind of stuff. Now, I am not that good of a loser. I'm a poor loser. I want to catch a damn fish and I want to have a perfect cast on the way. So I thought, what could I say to help guys that are struggling with their casting and it's not coming along as planned? And I totally get that because life doesn't go along as planned. We have all these high expectations. They don't get met. They're unrealized, and you have to just have your head on straight. So what I thought I would do is make a video about some things that will help you when you're casting. And the first thing I thought of is you have to have an easy to cast outfit. You know, when the water starts getting colder, you know, these guys on the Deschutes, they start putting the heavy sink tips on. And that's not always necessary. You don't need a heavy sink tip. You can get away with a floating line and a long leader, maybe a little bit heavier fly. Not super heavy, but I'm thinking Alec Jackson steelhead iron, sparsely dressed, long 15, 17-foot leader or 12-foot, whatever, and try to get the fly in the zone with a Scandi line or something, with a nice leader that's easy and fun to cast. This is really just basically a silly way to fish. And sometimes it's super effective, but sometimes it's just kind of silly. But so is all fly fishing. You know, we could just put a big old, well, we can't on the Deschutes, but you could be a bait fisherman and make things easier for yourself. But we're fly fishermen, we're spey guys, and the thing about spey is we want to enjoy it. And the idea with spey for me is a cast and a line that's fun to cast, easy to cast. I don't want a heavy sink tip. That's a last ditch effort on a mild sink tip or a floating line. The idea of a sink tip, you know, we think about them to turn over heavy flies and to sink deep and to get them in the zone. But really the idea that we need to think about it more is, and with the same with the 3D lines and all that stuff, we're just trying to get the fly to slow down in the zone so a fish can have plenty of time to get aggravated at it and bite it. We give fish a lot of credit for lateral lines and all these instincts, and they can hear 100 yards down this way and 100 yards upstream, and oh my gosh, you know, they're so brilliant at picking up vibration and sound and noise. And waves, sound, whatever the kind of waves they hear. And that's true. But on the other hand, if that's the case, why do we feel like we need a broadside presentation for steelhead? I mean, steelhead, they're so simplistic. It really is easy to swing for steelhead. You cast, mend accordingly, and you try to swing slow. If that doesn't work, maybe you can speed it up next time. The idea is with a sink tip, you want to slow it down enough to get it in front of the fish so they can lift up, grab it, and eat the fly. So the idea with a sink tip is to slow the fly down. We don't need a big, heavy, cumbersome sink tip all the time, especially when we're fishing late fall, late summer fish. We want I want a manageable, fun to cast sink tip and a small fly, like a small salmon fly or hairwing or a hobo spey. That's a good example. A type 3 sink tip is just fine for a lot of cases. We don't need T14. A lot of cases we don't need T11. T8 is fine. OPST riffle, 96 grain sink tip is fine. We don't always need a big, heavy, cumbersome outfit. So to give yourself an advantage and to make your casting fun, cast an outfit that's fun to cast on a Scandi line with a floating Scandi line, long leader, sparse dress fly, or a light sink tip and a light fly. That's plenty in a lot of cases. So the other thing is, I see guys really working on improving, and I can tell they've had lessons, and they get out there and they set their anchor, and then they get their casting angle, and then they get their fulcrum and their bottom hand. They're doing everything kind of right, but they're missing something. And what they're missing is all that stuff, all those mechanics don't always put you in the position to make a great cast. What puts you in a position is casting with that rod tip and a manageable high sweep. Okay, we don't need to peel fast and flat and hard and just rip the line. You can peel at an angle and just casually angle around, elegantly circle up or drift and cast, and think about casting with the rod tip. Let go all these and I've preached this a lot, hand position, fulcrum, all that crap. And that is true, but you're much better off to maybe use a little too much top hand, maybe not do everything perfect, and just keep thought of that rod tip path coming up in the sweep, relaxing, and just flipping that tip and getting a nice cast where the rod does the work. And that is done by timing and tempo, and not so much having all these perfect, correct hand positions. There's two ways to learn to cast. You can get the hand position perfect, all these things just exactly right and cast, but that takes a long time. You have to start out casting and practice casting and not do the fishing part until you get the cast right. But I would rather see guys get a little success, feel that little sweet spot, even if their hands aren't perfect, their fulcrum's not perfect, their angles aren't perfect. I'd rather see them just cast with that rod tip and have an elegant, sweet spot cast where the rod does the cast. You can even stop low. The rod's going to unbend on its own. But we don't want to muscle it and peel it and rip it. We want that angle and that tempo, the relaxation, and then that nice, easy cast. We don't want We don't want to rip it across flat until you're really, really good. And then even then, that's not even going to help you that much. You want to hit that sweet spot. It's all about timing, a very light anchor, a very manageable fly and sink tip, making the rod do the work by just a smooth cast. Don't think rip it and touch it. Think peel it up. Rod tip keeps going up, and a nice cast. Let's put styles aside, and let's put continuous motion and underhand and all those things aside for a little bit, and just think about the rod tip path going up, the D loop staying up off the water. If we sweep at a steep angle, the bottom of the D loop is going to be steep, so we'll get a nice light anchor. So we don't always need the heavy outfits to catch the fish. Sink tips are for slowing the lines and the fly down to give the fish a shot. And we want to cast with that rod tip. Want to loosen up and relax. Don't try so hard. Don't try so hard. And the thing about all this is, all of us, nobody started out as an expert. We all went through all of this. You know, I know guys who can really cast, fly shop guys, guides, enthusiasts, competition spey casters. They all went out alone, probably, and they worked on it and they worked on it and practiced and practiced and practiced till they were blue in the face and got good at it because they had a huge pride in it. You know, these guys that make their living or who are very serious about casting, they take a lot of pride in it. And that's why practice is so important, because nobody wants their peers to see them as a crappy caster. And so it really will help you if you go somewhere. If you want to be good, you have to make it a point to go somewhere and practice, and not just practice, but fish. Fishing is a really great way to practice, but you got to practice first, I believe, to get to where you're just using the rod. You're having the rod do the work, and these lines are just built so beautifully that they will cast themselves if you give yourself an opportunity to succeed and set yourself up for success. So we want a smooth sweep and a smooth forward cast. We don't want to rip it and punch it and hurt our lower back. You know, hammer it with our top hand. You can use a lot of top hand if you need to get it to fly, because I used to do it all the time, and I got some really nice loops. I mean, I had a funky sweep, and I came around and I crept, and then I would cast, but my rod tip would be lower, and I threw out some beautiful, pretty effortless bar loops, doing it all wrong because my rod tip path was correct. I don't know. I just liked to cast, and it didn't really get hard until I made some bad habits and had to correct them. But I would rather see you, most of us know, even when I started doing this, there was not the information that there is now about all the correct parts of a spey cast. So now there's so much information, it's easy to focus on the wrong things and overlook the fact that we just want to sweep up high and just cast with that rod tip with a nice, easy to cast outfit. Should be pleasant, So kind of understand the mechanics, but don't get so focused on them that you're not thinking of the flow and the tempo and that tight loop. You don't want to cast too much line. A rod length is fine to cast. When I'm fishing a Scandi head, I'm happy to get a tight loop with the rod length or a length and a half of shooting line. I will go far sometimes, but you can cover enough water fishing 50 or 60 feet to catch a fish. There's a lot of runs where they rely on wading deep and casting far, but there's also lots of runs where you don't have to do that. You don't have to cast a mile. You don't have to wade real deep. You can just have a nice, pristine, elegant, tight loop, super efficient, non-effortful cast. So try to hit the sweet spot. Don't try to cast too far. Don't try to rip too hard. Rip at a steep angle. Take your time. You should be so relaxed that your knees could be bent. You can stand stiff as a board or do a little bit of that. Not too much with a short head though. That'll mess you up. But the idea is the rod tip and the rod tip path does everything. And we don't try to kill it. We stay relaxed. There's a tempo. There's a rhythm. It's relaxed. It's not a stiff mechanical thing. It's a relaxed, elegant, kind of dance kind of thing. Where you're just using that rod tip and you're just flipping it in that line to make a tight loop, unless you're casting dumbbell eyes and you want to stop it lower. But develop a rhythm and a tempo. Get out on a pond or at least overhead cast in your yard. Get handy. Get on the water. Cut the fly off or cut the hook off the fly and cast for hours. Everybody who got good did that, from Deck Hogan to Edward to, and I don't even know this, but I guarantee you they got alone, they practiced, they filmed themselves, they had somebody watch. They just did it and did it and did it because they had pride in being a good caster. It's their life. So that's what it takes. It takes a lot of dedication, but it's not like, if all the time I've put into casting, which has been quite a bit, and all that stuff, if I had used that to become a lead guitar player, okay, I would suck at the guitar, because becoming a violinist or a guitar player or a great musician requires way more time, way more dedication. This is fairly easy, by and large, unless you're like the greatest distance caster in the world. That might take a little more time, but also there's talent to be considered. So some of us aren't that talented, and that's fine. Just try to do a smooth, heavy feeling, elegant, rhythmic, rod tip high, bottom hand pull, just a little. Even if you hit it with your top hand more, if the loop doesn't lie, the forward loop does not lie. So if you get a cast with a good forward loop, stick to that, and then incrementally you can kind of switch a little to a little more bottom hand, all these different things. But try to cast a little bit more like that, and give yourself a break. Have fun. Learn to throw tight loops. Take some time and do it, and try to make your casting and fishing experience match, because we're trying to catch a unicorn. Trying to catch two unicorns. One unicorn is that elusive wild steelhead. They turn on, they turn off, they disappear. Sometimes they go swim on their side under a rock, according to John McMillan. Sometimes they run away with your fly rod and swim 1.5 miles downriver. They can just move all over the place. Sometimes they don't feel like biting, sometimes they do. So if you make sure you're not fishing with a fouled line or a line with moss on it or a hook that's not sharp or a hook that's fouled, have your act together, make elegant, beautiful casts, even if they're short. And that is the other unicorn we're after, that perfect cast. And there is, when you get the perfect cast and you can't catch the perfect fish, it does take the edge off of the feeling of disappointment. So I hope that helps. Merry Christmas, everybody. Thanks for watching.